Depuis 2017, le One Planet Summit relève le niveau d'ambition de la communauté internationale pour la nature en engageant
This brings in private and citizens and international organizations, NGOs and companies, researchers and communities around the world. Basically, our future is that of our planet, and it depends on what we do here and now. In January 2021, the fourth One Planet Summit looked at biodiversity.
Filling oceans with plastic, and now nature is striking back. Temperatures are reaching record highs, biodiversity is collapsing, and we are extremely fragile.
Climate change and the loss of biodiversity are defining issues of our time.
une vingtaine
About 20 coalitions are working for restoration of ecosystems and protection of biodiversity. And this involves more than 130 governments, 30 international organizations, 125 major private companies, and 4,000 researchers. And this is mobilizing resources so that we can get verifiable results.
ainsi.
In this way, the Great Green Wall, which is 8,000 kilometers across Africa, is going to restore 250 million hectares and create 10 million jobs between now and 2030. The partners of One Planet Summit have invested $16 billion in the project. The Alliance for the Conservation of Wetlands. And we are working against deforestation, and this is why the Rainforest Group has been set up in Amazon. We have helped indigenous women to manage their own forests and given them the means to do so. The Land Degradation Neutrality Fund is one of the innovating financial instruments, has already raised 280 million euros for developing countries. And in Bhutan, in the Himalayas, investment from the LDN has meant sustainable and profitable hazelnut business has been launched. And this is aligned with climate neutrality, which is the country's policy.
The decisions over the next decade will determine the fate not only of the world's biodiversity, but also the fate of us all.
Le One Planet Summit, des résultats concrets pour...
We want concrete results. Basically, Earth's future is our future.
Mesdames et messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen, ministers, good morning.
In French, English, and Spanish. So if you need an interpretation box, there are some on the stairs. So be sure to pick your interpretation box and your and the cask at the exit. The Minister of Ecological Transition is actually going up the stairs, down the stairs. She's already here. So I give the floor to Minister Barbara Pompili, Ministre de la Transition.
The Minister of Ecological Transition. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, ministers and leaders of international organization, people from the business sector, people from finance sector, and also from non-governmental organizations, and also to the general public who are with us here in Marseille, who are following online. I would like to welcome all of you to Marseille, and we certainly have been really enjoying ourselves here with the President Macron here, and we also are impressed by the international leadership, which has been evidenced by the welcome that we've received here in Marseille. France is particularly proud that we're hosting this major event for ecological transition, as it was proud to welcome the most recent One Planet Summit in January, and that was in Paris, and it looked at biodiversity in particular. We decided to run these high-level meeting despite the rather difficult situation that we face because of COVID-19. We want to show that mobilizing everyone so that we can conserve biodiversity remains a top priority. This collective multipartisan approach is basically is the feature of One Planet, which was launched in 2017 with the President and the Secretary of the United Nations and also the President of the World Bank. I'm very happy that these key partners, which are the UN and the World Bank, are, as always, with us at today's meeting. And I would like to welcome their representatives, Inge Anderson and Vani Pangestu, and I would like to welcome there. And I also welcome the fact that we have women leaders with us today. And looking beyond the World Bank and the UN, we also bring together another of our other partners from several sectors and from several backgrounds. And it is this multiple approach, so we break out of our silos, is what gives it strength. Not only do we have partners, but we also have the One Planet family, and they are committed to climate and nature, and that family is here in Marseille today. Today, we have made to raise our ambitions here. We have struggled against the loss of biodiversity and global warming. And we have also been able to bring forward a number of major initiatives so that we could free up the resources needed for transition and so that we could bring about this change that our economy needs. And already we can see some of these changes already today. The DFC, the Development Finance Club, and the Task Force on Transparency, and the Factor, the TCFD work, and also looking at the financial risks, and there is a central bank network on that. And also we've looked at how we have looked at the alignment of sovereign funds in the Paris Agreement. Now, there have been mixed investment, public and private, such as the LDN, which is for degraded lands, or the SRL fund, which is so that we can meet international and bring together international players. So One Planet is basically about a number of coalitions, and these have come about through international discussions, and about half of these are involved in protection of nature, and about half of these groups are now here in Marseille. We're also looking at the tangible results that we've achieved, and we have done that by providing real value added on the ground. This is we've seen multilateralism as defended by President Macron, and who is very close to the One Planet Summit ideas, as you would have seen at Friday's opening. So could I just give you a few examples of this? Thanks to the initiative, the Kiwa initiative, some invasive species have been eliminated from islands. The Mediterranean program has meant that protected areas have been created in the Mediterranean basin, and also the Great Green Wall has meant that we'll be able to rehabilitate degraded soils in the Sahel area, and the Alliance for the Conservation of wet forests has meant that we'll be able to work and involve women in the Amazon in decisions which affect their habitat. So basically, these are things we're going to be talking about this morning, and this was by the President of France at the end of January summit. Now, today, we're not going to be able to deal with all of the results from the 20 initiatives that have been taken, and I would ask you to go on to the One Planet Summit's website so you can look in detail at all these projects. We will, of course, be mentioning some of them. We'll be referring to some of them, and we'll also be looking at lessons to be drawn, and we'll be looking at to what extent we can repeat these and scale up these ideas. So basically, we're looking at whether we can really answer and live up to the words and the promises that were made. Can we actually abide by those promises? And I would like to say that all of you are part of the dynamic of One Planet, and I'd like to thank you all for your commitment standing foursquare with us on climate issues. And we have to continue this work. I would like to thank you for your efforts. And what I would now invite you to do is to look at the video which has been prepared by the director of the World Bank, Mrs. Marine, who cannot be with us, unfortunately, and it was difficult to get a direct link because of the time difference between Washington and Marseille. But the World Bank, together with the UN, has been with us since 2017 as part of the One Planet dynamic, and they play a very key role. Thank you.
Minister Pompili and State Secretary Abba, thank you for welcoming us today at this very important gathering. I am pleased to join both of you and my good friend Amina Mohammed, as well as all participants, to discuss progress made through the One Planet Summit in support of the environment and the livelihoods depending on it. Since it was launched in 2017 by the President of France, the President of the World Bank Group, and the Secretary General of the United Nations, the One Planet Summit has been a key platform for raising ambition and mobilizing multi-stakeholder action on climate and biodiversity. Climate change and biodiversity loss are critical development challenges, and the urgency of action has never been clearer. The One Planet Summit brought together key partners at the right time and has consistently pushed the world to be more ambitious. At the One Planet Summit in Paris in 2017, the World Bank Group announced ramped-up support to countries to take strong climate action. This included our own commitment to stop financing upstream oil and gas. Since then, we have gone even further. Today, the Bank Group is the largest multilateral funder of climate investment in developing countries and provides 2/3 of all multilateral finance for climate adaptation. Under our new 5-year climate change action plan, which we announced in June, the World Bank Group will align all our financing with the goals of the Paris Agreement. We are explicit in wanting this financing to maximize results. The CCAP signals out our ramped-up efforts to move from investing in green projects to helping countries fully integrate their climate and development goals. And we are backing that up with more finance over the next 5 years. 35% of all our financing on average will go towards climate action. In 2018, at the One Planet Summit in New York, we announced $1 billion to accelerate investments in battery storage for energy systems in developing and middle-income countries. Since then, projects have been approved supporting 3.9 gigawatt hours of battery storage across Africa and Asia. And earlier this year, President Malpass announced our scaled-up support to the countries of the Sahel that are part of the Great Green Wall, an initiative to build resilient landscape and livelihoods across the region and beyond. So over the next 4 years, we will be investing in that region, in the Sahel region, $5.6 billion in 61 projects in climate-smart agriculture, environment, water, resilient infrastructure, energy access, renewable energy, financial inclusion, and jobs. We are making good progress, and our investments will help transform livelihoods across the Sahel, where over 27 million people are likely to become climate migrants by 2050 if we don't do anything. In addition, we are seeing progress in the effort to reduce deforestation through our Forest Carbon Partnership Facility. After a decade of hard work preparing for results-based finance that would benefit the poorest and incentivize governments to protect forests, finance has started flowing. Some 14 countries have signed agreements unlocking up to $670 million to forest protection. And we've just made the first payment to Mozambique. This illustrates that concerted and sustained efforts by partners with a common goal can achieve results. The World Bank Group is proud to have been a partner of the One Planet Summit since the beginning. This partnership has helped to bring key players together to support climate and biodiversity goals. While we take stock of our collective achievements, We also recognize that the work is far from over. We have seen the value of global partnership through One Planet Summit. Now it will be critical for all partners here, together with civil society and the private sector, to continue to develop strategies for low carbon and climate resilient development, to ensure recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic is greener, more resilient, and more inclusive. We welcome the adoption of new and more ambitious targets for biodiversity through the upcoming Convention on Biological Diversity, COP negotiations. At the World Bank Group, we consider biodiversity is key to a resilient recovery and stand ready to support countries as they invest in nature. I thank you.
Merci. Je remercie très chaleureusement.
Thank you very much. Warm thanks to the World Bank. And they are with us on this. And I think it is vital that development banks put biodiversity at the very center of their actions. I will now give the floor to Inge Andersen, the Executive Director of the Environmental UN Environment Programme. I think she's with us direct from Nairobi, I think. Thank you, Inge. Can we bring Inge in? There, I think you're connected. There you are. Oh, wonderful. There you are. Thank you very much for being with us today, Inge, and thank you for being with us to bring us the message of Secretary General Guterres and Mohammed, who have always given us great support in what we've done in all editions of the summit. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, chère Barbara, Madam Minister, and of course to Mari, my colleague from the World Bank, and to everyone here today. I'm very much honored to address this One Planet Summit on behalf of the United Nations. And as we just heard from Mari Gusta, we are very, very proud to be accompanying with the World Bank our French partners and host in the One Planet journey, where we have brought together partners from across the spectrum to focus on critical environmental issues. Here we are speaking today about biodiversity and humanity's pursuit of growth and profit at all cost has caused the triple planetary crisis, the crisis of climate change, the crisis of biodiversity loss, and the crisis of pollution. Now we're living with the consequences. We're living with the consequences despite the many warnings that we have received. Our one planet is being destroyed by one species, us. But we can do better. We can change. We can unite under the banner of global cooperation. We've done it before to form the United Nations and to address global conflict, to protect the ozone layer, to end the use of leaded petrol. Now, we need to do it to protect nature and biodiversity. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will be our latest blueprint to protect nature and biodiversity. We need a framework that shifts the way we define the multiple values of nature, that transforms agriculture and food systems by moving to regenerative practices and weeding out nature-destroying subsidies, that promotes a better built environment and circular economies, that listens to the voices of the indigenous people and local communities, that brings nature solutions to restore a degraded planet and delivers up to 1/3 of the mitigation action required to keep global temperatures below 1.5 degrees Celsius. But the framework is not only a blueprint for a healthier nature. The Paris Agreement, the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, the Montreal Protocol, the Beyond the 2020 Chemicals Framework, dozens of smaller environmental agreements across the globe. All these agreements deal with issues that damage biodiversity, and all must work together to deliver on biodiversity as well as their primary mandate. But as the One Planet Summit acknowledges, we need a whole of society lift, not just the environmental movement standing and straining to lift this burden. We need a global movement in which businesses report on their dependencies and their impacts on nature, and change to nature-positive business models in which big investors stop backing industries like single-use plastics and start backing those that make money while restoring the planet, in which governments put the right policies in place, eliminate harmful subsidies, and start to plug funding gaps, including through using COVID recovery stimulus packages to create global economic recovery that takes us forwards, not backwards. The One Planet Summit has helped to create such cooperation, and we at the United Nations have been proud partners. At the 2017 summit, for example, UNEP and BNP Paribas signed an agreement to invest at least 10 billion into sustainable land management and renewable energy by 2025. UNEP's finance initiative amplifies this work with over 250 banks, insurers, and asset managers working to develop the sustainable finance and responsible investment agendas. Such cooperation helps, but we all need to step up. Look, we often talk about biodiversity as if we, humanity, are separate from it, but we're not. We're part of that incredible web of life, of biodiversity. But we act like that spider who created the web and who can tear it down. But unlike the spider, we cannot build another web. This planet is our only web. It's time we start treating it that way. Thank you very much once more, and greetings from Nairobi, Kenya.
Merci.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Inger, for this inspiring speech, and shows us to what extent action of the United Nations is important to implement all the commitments which we take. And thank you too for your contribution of the entire system of the United Nations to the process of One Planet since its creation. Now we've stopped the introduction. Let's go to the heart of the matter. We have 3 sessions. The first concerns the mobilization of public actors for nature and biodiversity. The second one concerns transformation of value change towards a positive economy for nature. The third is about innovation to finance conservation and restoration of ecosystems. I'd like to invite the panelists for the first session to join me on the stage, i.e. public actors mobilized for nature and biodiversity. Jeanne d'Arc Mujamariwa, Minister for the Environment of Rwanda, I believe she's here. René Rieu, Director General of the French Agency for Development and President of IDFC. Ibrahim Theo, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, as well as Gregorio Mirabal, Coordinator General of COICA, an NGO which brings together the indigenous organization peoples of the Amazon Basin. Thanks to one and all of being with us today. Please take your seats. Good morning. Delighted to meet you. Thank you very much for coming. Please take your place. Okay, mobilization, political mobilization, is it at the heart of the process of One Planet Summit? Some 60 heads of states and governments were present in the first summit in Paris in December 2017. Today, more than 140 states are involved in one way or another in the initiatives which are linked to the One Planet Summit. The Minister of the Environment of Rwanda, you form part of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. Why is it essential, according to you, that government should get together to better protect nature? I shall give you the floor. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Dear colleagues, good morning.
Is an intergovernmental coalition of over 70 countries. Its objective is to build a critical mass of countries to advocate for the adoption of a 30% land and 30% sea protection target by 2030 at COP15. The coalition is grounded in science. Numerous studies show the increasing protection areas is necessary if we want to halt biodiversity loss by 2030. It's important to note that the target is not just a quantitative target. We need to ensure that the target is implemented the right way. Protected and conserved areas must be located in areas of importance for biodiversity. They must be effectively managed, well connected, and equitably governed. The involvement of indigenous people and local communities in the establishment and subsequent implementation of these areas will therefore be crucial. The coalition was launched in January 2021 at the One Planet Summit for Biodiversity at the level of heads of state and government. This launch generated unprecedented momentum around the importance of the 30 by 30 target. Madam Minister, I'm pleased to report that 6 months after its launch, the coalition now has over 70 member countries, to be exact 72. This is a proof that the momentum initiated at the One Planet Summit has continued and grown stronger. Finally, Madam Minister, dear colleagues, it will also be necessary to guarantee human and financial resources so that the protected areas are not paper parks, but truly deliver on biodiversity outcomes. In particular, this will require an increase in resource dedicated to conservation, capacity building programs, and technology transfer to developing countries, and large-scale scientific cooperation. The coalition aims to mobilize at high level to advocate for the importance of the 30% target, but it also brings together experts and negotiators from its member countries who coordinate to present unified positions during negotiations. For example, during recent virtual discussions we all have during COVID on the post-2020 framework at the third open-ended working group, we saw that the HAC countries stood together to defend the 30% target. These discussions, among others, experts, allow us to reflect on the many dimensions of the 30% target, share good practices, and define our position. We also have to support and the support of the civil society, IUCN, and the scientific community to assist us. With the High Ambition Coalition for Nature, we are sending a clear signal that a growing number of countries support science and are ready to translate its message in international arena and into concrete action. The 30% protection target is not just a new quantitative target. It is an opportunity to implement a new approach to conservation based on lesson learned, an opportunity to do better. It is an opportunity to continue to improve conservation practices internationally by promoting examples of good practices, including co-management of protected area. Because this biodiversity can live without us, but we can't live without biodiversity. And unless all of us become resilient, none of us will be resilient. Thank you, Madam Minister.
Merci.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Minister, for the very clear and inspiring description of what's at stake concerning 3030 project and to form part of these 60, 70 ambitious governments which have been committed to defend this objective. And I certainly hope that your intervention, your convincing intervention, will bring on other countries on board. Now, ladies and gentlemen, political mobilization should be able to be translated into specific actions implemented on the ground. And the development banks are essential links between policies and should also commit itself to the cause of biodiversity. I shall give the floor to Rémi Rio, Director General of the French Agency for Development and President of the International Development Finance Club, who deals with various deliverables in One Planet Something. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. I'm delighted to be here with you this morning. Well, first of all, thank you very much indeed, and bravo to the initiatives for One Planet Summit. I was there in December 2017 in a very specific context with the President of France, President of the World Bank too, then Jim Keen, United Nations representatives, where then they created this space of debate to make the planet great again at a time when the US withdrew from the Paris Agreement, and we needed this political mobilization. And there was a certain intuition, a strong intuition, that we needed to link these three COPs, biodiversity, desertification, and biodiversity. And Ibrahim is here, and there was this idea that we needed a coalition of actors, as you said, Madam Minister, and innovative ideas. And we see there was a will there to take full measure of what was going on. And since we're dealing with nature on the 11th of January for the One Planet Summit, last January, in my own area, which is finance, together with the publication of a small pink book for paper for biodiversity, we thought that we're talking about billions of dollars, which we needed every year to mobilize between now and 2030 to stabilize our ecosystems. We have just 150 billion. We need to multiply that by 6 or 7 to be able to reach the required figure. We need to mobilize all actors, for example, governments by rechanneling grants, private sector too, which we'll talk about later, and then public development banks to make this link and to show the ambition and to accelerate things. This is what we're doing in the AFT. We are doubling our finance for biodiversity between now and 2015, and we've also taken aboard a commitment of 30 by 30 by 30 of getting 30% of our climate finance devoted for positive results for nature. We share all this in this AIDFC club, some 26 other public banks, both regional and national banks, and for the first time we have come up with our first assessment. We have $14 billion financing per year, half of which goes to the climate. So 30% would be it's only 15%, so 30% would be a good increase. And so we've a great deal of stuff to do. And we, of course, together with the support of One Planet Summit and the very specific summits, I don't want to go into any details. You mentioned the Kiwa initiative, more than 40 million euros with Canada, Australia, New Zealand, European Union. So that in the try to find nature-based solutions to keep biodiversity in the Pacific with that German, with the BMZ, we have set the Legacy Landscape Fund to innovate in terms of conservation. We know about the Project Trésor, which was launched within the One Planet Summit framework, mobilizing thousands of researchers in 50 countries about the idea of One Health, which is also very, very important. Ibrahim will no doubt come back to the Great Green Wall. So much for the role of the public banks. I'd like to conclude by saying it's not just public banks, but it's public banks as these are the pollinators, basically, the little bees in the financial system to work together. Then we have the LDN fund, to work, and Christine Lagarde was here together with central banks, with the French bank. This is the DFD, in order to define a methodological framework which brings in all financial actors, both public and private, and to be accountable, of course, because we are not perfect. We are far from it. We do have fundings which destroys nature, so we need to look at indigenous peoples and humankind, and it's a good idea to have a place where we are accountable and where we can invent all together. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rémi, for your presentation. The ideas, the take-homes here from development banks, you are pollinators. I find that this is a very good image. I know that we can count on the AFT as well as your networks to come up here. The convergence for these public actors needs to go to a higher level. The accelerator of the Great Green Wall, which we launched for the OPS in January, is a good example of this ambition. $19 billion have been mobilized for 11 Sahel countries. And now I shall give the floor to Ibrahim Thio, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, to present the progress of this very ambitious project. You have the floor.
Thank you. $19 billion has been pledged by 9 partners to 11 countries, and they're facing one of the most serious difficulties, which is the loss of land, the loss of soil, the loss of productivity, the loss of hope for young people, the loss of a way for women to farm. And therefore, we're in a situation which is extremely critical for 11 Sahel countries. And we have basically, this is a huge population which is at risk here. And therefore, we have to wonder, how can we meet the needs of those populations? How can we do it through the natural resources, which is their bank, really? It is what they have, that is their resource that they have, because most of what they do is from the primary sector. So looking at climate change, and when we see greater droughts and more droughts, and when people start to lose hope, then they also lose trust in their own governments, and there's no way back. And therefore, that is what we're facing today. That is the challenge we face. $19 billion, and of course, is an important sum. But if you look at the first 10 years of the Great Green Wall, we've seen that to get our target for 2030, then 8 billion hectares have to be rehabilitated a year. And you need 4.3 billion a year between now and 2030. If we want to get basically create 10,000 jobs and rehabilitate 100,000 hectares. Now, this 19 billion, which is basically an accelerator, as we call it, and we've seen this over the first 10 years, we didn't restore more than about 18% if we look at all the areas covered, and it depends, and also, particularly if you look at the route of the Great Green Wall. Now, we've drawn a number of lessons of what we've done thus far. You can certainly actually rehabilitate land, and it's not expensive if you do it in good time. And not only do you plant trees, you bring back farming, you bring back animal husbandry, but also you look at post-harvest losses as well. And one of the main problems we have is the sun. Now, technology has changed a lot, so rather than losing the 40% simply because of the heat, we can use that heat and so that we can actually make that heat into cold, so we can actually protect crops post-harvest. And this creates value change, and that'll be coming up a bit later, so that we can actually then process these agricultural goods. And the great thing about all of this is that there are products which come from the Sahel today, and which are a real gift of nature. And basically, this is something which is great for the outside world. So if we can actually use and market them, then that is going to bring a genuine transformation in the area. Now, Minister, you asked where we are today and what has happened since the January summit. Well, 48% of the amounts have been pledged has actually been spent. So basically, we can see that there's a genuine dynamic here, and it's a very good thing. It's very positive, and there seems to be a will to move ahead. So, have we got to cruising speed? No. And are people on the ground starting to see the results? Not yet. So I think we're going to have to speed up and have to continue to speed up so that we can meet the targets that we've set ourselves. It's very good that we've got this commitment to spending, but as yet it hasn't got through to the populations. So, I mean, clearly you're not going to do anything in 6 months, but we do need to build on the dynamic that's been unleashed. And we've spoken about COP26, the meeting which is going to take in a few weeks' time, and also biodiversity. I know is we've also got the COP on the desertification in Côte d'Ivoire, which is close to the Great Green Wall, and I think there might be another possibility there to take stock at that COP, which is scheduled for May of next year, so that we can look at land rehabilitation, not just being seen as something of the Sahel. It's a global problem, and we've done the Great Green Wall in the Sahel, but we could do it anywhere else, though. And I think what we can do is perhaps repeat this. We could perhaps build on this and spread this idea. And we see that this is a way that we can try and feed humanity. But I would say that 95% of production is based on our land. And if we look at the growth on this, and if we don't rehabilitate those lands, then we're not going to achieve this. The Chair, thank you. The Minister. Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Thank you for talking about the Great Green Wall. Now, I think you're right. I think we need to get together so that we can keep track of what progress we're making and also see whether we can repeat this elsewhere. Now, I think we've seen that you can see that it works, that it is a good thing, and that you can then do this elsewhere. And I'm very happy that you've got a number who are working on the Great Green Wall. We've got people from the UN and also the Green Fund for the Climate, and we have a number of people who are involved in the Great Green Wall. So we'll finish this. We're now going to have an eyewitness account here so that you can see that these promises that are made can lead to actual projects, and these can involve men and women around the world. And today we have invited someone who is part of the Alliance for Tropical Rainforests, and this was created, the initiative of President Macron, so that we could fight against degradation of ecosystems in tropical forests. A number of projects were drawn up on this base, and Mr. Mirabal is from the Amazonia Verde project, which has been supported by the project, and this particularly looks at the Amazon basin, and particularly the work done by women there. You have the floor. No, I'm fine. Thank you. Could I thank you for allowing me to speak today, and I'm very happy to be with you today, Minister, and to be in this conference. Now, I know we don't see the whole planet at the moment, and I think we have to speak truth from our heart. And I would like to thank President Macron, who is our host at this conference and at this summit. And I would like to thank the spirit of the jungle, which is allowing us to meet and discuss. We are here because we have a right to live. We have a right to live in Mother Nature in the Amazon, because what we want to do is protect our fresh water, our biodiversity, and the land we live on, which is at risk. And for this reason, we would like to thank you that we're here at One Planet, together with the One Planet family. And we would ask One Planet, we would ask President Macron that we believe that here we have the spirit of the Paris Agreement here. In France, Paris Agreement was established, and it is because of that we, as an indigenous peoples from the Amazon, we are asking that we be members of one planet, because we have lands, we have water, we have biodiversity. We want to have people who we can talk to around this table. And at the same time, we would like to ask that you help us so that we can protect and conserve. When we talk about biodiversity, people talk about indigenous peoples, and you can't separate them. We are there, we have a knowledge, we know the land. Therefore, it's important that we use meetings such as this, events such as this, so that we continue fighting for our land, for our nature. And we would ask that you continue supporting us so that we can defend the life and the lands of the Amazon basin, which are at risk. Turning now to what the minister said, the Minister of Ecological Transition, and we do hope that we will actually bring about this transition and that it will be a genuine transformation. And we would like to say thank you. We would say that in the worst pandemic that humanity has gone through, political, social, ethical, the only government on the planet which gave direct support to the indigenous people was the French government. And I would like to thank you, and I'd like to thank President Macron for that. He has sent a direct help to indigenous people, and he didn't do this going via governments. And I think this was a great example for other European governments and governments around the world, that you can do things directly with indigenous people, and we'd like to thank France for that. Second point, we would like to thank the fact that we've now begun a process, and that is the Green Amazon. And this is basically looking at woodlands for the future, but also we have to look at forests now as well, not just in the future. Because this means that we can get a good idea about, in this long-term project, how we're actually going to protect and conserve our natural resources in the Amazons. Basically, which is living trees, which is biodiversity, which is living animals, flora and fauna. And this is very important because, and also we have to look at our brothers and sisters there, those who collect the seeds, those who know how nature renews itself, because indigenous women are basically, they are women, they are knowledge, they are themselves, they embody knowledge, and this is knowledge which we have from the millennium. And we are going to be able to use this with the support of the French government, with alliances, and with the OCM, and of course, by doing this, we want to have living trees, fresh water, clean air, and we want to guarantee this because at the moment we're talking about an area which 8 million square kilometers of tropical forest covering 7 countries, where there are 7 countries that it covers. And it's important that this is a real hope that we're talking about it. And that hope is that the French government can convince other governments to become part of this initiative. Because at the moment, we are saying that we want to save 80% of this tropical forest in the Amazon. And we're looking at getting results for 2025. And I think we will get results in 2025. And I think we can say that we will still have our way of life and we will still maintain and protect and safeguard our knowledge. And therefore, could I just say to the world that please support this initiative. Please join us. And we've heard from a number of players, the World Bank and the United Nations. But the only way in which we can achieve this is for us all to join together. That we shouldn't just be at the by-side looking in. We should be a part of this as well. And I think in this way we can achieve these results. And my final point is this. This is a time, this is a historic moment. There is a major crisis that we're facing at the moment. It's a many-faceted crisis, but at the same time we have a major opportunity because we're doing things, and if we do these things well, then we will stay alive. If we don't do them well, then very life itself, nature, will judge us, and it will judge us as we've seen. Thank you.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Very important testimony, because it shows us to what extent we can all be actors and partners, and we will not get there without each other. We need to repeat this. I'd like to say that you are obviously partners in this work, which we've done together. I'd like to pick up something you said, which seems to me very fair. We live at a moment when we are working with biodiversity. I hope that the spirit of the Paris Agreement, which is here, can guide us to get back to Coming, to get us to Coming within a couple of months, and to have such a strong ambition too as we have here, an internationally recognized ambition concerning biodiversity. I wish one and all, thank you very much for your testimonies, and we wish the best of success to the groups of indigenous peoples in the Amazon basin. Ladies and gentlemen, mobilization of public partners is one thing, but of course, as we've just seen, we need to work together with private sector and economic actors. This is the subject of our second session this morning, which will be moderated by Madame Catherine, who I'd like to invite to come up here. She's the head of Business for Nature, World Economic Forum. I'd like to call on all participants to come up onto the stage, and also like to thank the previous speakers for their presentations and contributions, which have been very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I think we are just missing one panelist. Oh, okay, great. It's my pleasure to be moderating this session entitled Transforming Value Chains Towards a Nature-Friendly Economy. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Akanksha Khatri, and I head the nature and biodiversity work at the World Economic Forum. On behalf of my fellow panelists, I would like to thank the Minister of Ecological Transition and Secretary of State for Biodiversity of France, Minister of Environment of Rwanda, Deputy Minister of Environment and Tourism of Albania, dignitaries and friends. I'm sure I speak on behalf of many of you that the energy at this IUCN Congress is infectious and super palpable. Maybe it's because it's the first gathering after nearly what seems like a year and a half. But I hope that the last year and a half has also been a rude but shocking reminder as to how planetary and human health are interlinked. This economy and society are embedded within the environment. They are not separated from the biosphere. Last year, the World Economic Forum released its New Nature Economy reports that identified that more than half the world's GDP is moderately or highly dependent on nature and its services. And shifting away from business as usual to a nature-positive pathway can unlock $10.1 trillion of opportunities and create approximately 400 million jobs. Biodiversity is no longer an environmental issue alone, but one which is an economic and business imperative as well. So I'm super delighted to be joined here today by three committed and frankly very impressive business leaders who are committed to a nature-positive business agenda. I would like to quickly introduce them. Yves Blouin, who's Executive Director of L'Occitane, Ulrich de Cohen, Group Chief Sustainability Officer of AXA, and Hervé Gastinel, who's the CEO of Ponant. Welcome to all of you. So maybe if it's okay, Yves, I'll begin with you. President Macron, in his speech at the opening, said that an advantage of meetings such as these is that we can build effective coalitions and partnerships. As an active member of One Planet Business and Biodiversity, could you help us understand how OP2B contributes to transforming value chains towards a land use and agriculture sector which is nature positive?
Thank you, Akanksha, and good morning. OP2B, we are all aware that today agriculture is a key driver for biodiversity loss and is having a major impact on climate change. Transforming the way we farm is a nature-based solution with multiple environmental and social benefits. This is what OP2B is about, bringing businesses together with experts and farmers using our supply chain to accelerate the transition. OP2B gathers more than 25 members from different agriculture-centric industries, representing $1 trillion turnover and using 3% of the arable available lands. OP2B companies have decided to focus on 3 key levers for change. 1, scaling up regenerative agriculture. 2, fighting against deforestation. And 3, introducing more biodiversity in our product ranges. More than 15 OP2B members have taken quantified and time-bound commitments to scale up regenerative agriculture in their supply chain. Though these commitments are impactful only if we can measure their impacts and report on their progresses. This is why today, OP2B will present an action framework to scale up regenerative agriculture. This is a set of guiding principles, impact indicators, and proposed reporting steps for companies. This is a very important milestone because we believe that alignment on standards for regenerative agriculture is vital to a coordinated global transition. I invite you all to attend the OP2B session at 2 p.m. this afternoon if you want to learn more about our actions and our plan.
Thank you so much, Yves. And I think that's a really good advertisement. I'm definitely looking forward to that session. But a partnership often works both ways, right? So it's great that you are bringing experiences to OP2B. But as a mid-sized company that L'Occitane is, how do you benefit from this coalition? And what are things that you're doing specifically in your value chains, which is progressing the agenda on biodiversity?
We are a plant-based company that has a long-standing commitment towards biodiversity. And I will give you 2 recent examples about our commitment. The first one, in 2020, we created a fair trade agroecology collective with a dozen of farmers' families in the south of France to push regenerative practices. These concerns farmers that are producing lavender, immortelle, almonds, verbena, and other raw material. A second example is our commitment in Burkina Faso, where we partner with more than 10,000 women to create a virtuous cycle around the shea butter production. Nice. And those commitments bring us to push for women empowerment, protect more the natural areas in which the trees are growing, reduce carbon emission, and fight against deforestation. So for us, as an entrepreneurial group, it is important to take swift decisions and swift actions, bringing us to take broader commitments in order to scale up. And that's the key. So this is where OP2B comes into play, and where we found a strong support and leverage, having that commitment with the other 25 members. And being part of that coalition really helps us to structure our biodiversity strategy and strengthen collaboration with all these other companies.
Thank you so much. Yeah, indeed. I think just the power of a coalition with so many different sizes and diversity of companies brings a change agenda forward. Let me now move to our second speaker. Thank you so much for joining us, Ulrich. I would love to, first of all, thank you and AXA for the incredible leadership in the space of financing for nature. But I'm sure you'll agree that despite all the best efforts, the challenges mean that we have a long way to go. According to a State of the Finance for Nature report, there is a $8.1 trillion financing gap when we look at the targets on climate change, land degradation, and biodiversity. So what are some of the concrete steps that AXA is taking, but also what are some of the recommendations that you would have for coalitions and industries that you can influence? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all. I'm going to speak in French, if that's fine.
I'd like to thank you very much for the invitation to form part of this very interesting morning for the One Planet Summit. For AXA, our commitment here vis-à-vis biodiversity is linked to what we've done for the past 10 years concerning climate change, and in the same way that our mobilization was born from the becoming aware of the strong risks due to climate change on society. It's the same awareness that was also moved us to get closer to the way where risks of biodiversity weigh on the financial state of companies. And this has been presented as an actor, which is a natural investor too. You've already said, Shankar, it's a business imperative today. It's absolutely imperative. And we became interested with the same conviction. This is what we learned from our own, when we became aware of climate change, about our efforts to avoid de-investment, and the conviction too that we have today, strong conviction, and which we committed to, and we want more collaboration to. We want to carry out reporting and to have methods and tools which will allow companies, and particularly the financial sector, to understand the impact and exposure, as well as how we can provide financial flows towards solutions which could provide a sort of to rebuild the ecosystem. So in 2018, we tried to understand what our own exposure was. We had to the Act for Nature, and then a couple of years later, we saw that the WWF presented the first agreement, which is called Into the Wild, which I'd encourage you to read and to look at, because it's a very exciting report, and they show what the financial risks are linked to the loss of biodiversity and what they could represent. In parallel with this report, what we did was, together with the WWF and other partners too, we called for the creation of the Task Force for Nature-Related Disclosures. So this is a task force or working group based on the model created with the TCFD after the COP meeting 5 years ago, to work together within the private sector with governments too, regulators, NGOs, and also the academia, in order to come up with a benchmark, a common benchmark, if possible, an international and convergent benchmark, which would allow us very, very quickly to come up with financial structures in order to measure and better understand the risks involved in the loss of biodiversity, the risk of degradation and loss of biodiversity, I repeat, in order to provide financial flows to put this to rights. And if we're optimistic, and we need to be optimistic, I look at this TCFD as an AXA representative, and the very quick way forward to create this benchmark, which should be internationally recognized also by regulators. We can see here that such a work job is possible. What I want to say is that with my team in AXA and elsewhere, this work of streamlining and explaining and understanding and providing indicators on biodiversity seems to be a bit more complicated than what's been talked about by decarbonizing. It's very complex work. The dimension show us that we have multiple streams, economy, social, cultural efforts. We need to do things with the NFT, I believe we bring together all the actors working on this area, and we can work together. We have the COP15 and meeting coming soon, And this work to clarify things and to provide tools, specific tools, can come to fruition so that all actors, private actors, can get down to work. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Ulrich. I couldn't agree more with you that TNFD and its announcement has really energized the entire space, even at the World Economic Forum. We are now hearing from investors and financial services companies who had never thought about biodiversity risks and impact and are really now jumping on the bandwagon. So thank you so much for your thoughts. I would love to now move to our third speaker, Hervé Gastinel. We've heard right now from a product company, a financial services company. You represent what many people call the hard-to-abate sector. But then you also bring a little bit of a hope that things can change towards a nature-positive pathway. So help us understand how specifically within your company, but overall for the maritime transport, how is biodiversity becoming relevant and how can you scale up a change agenda?
Great. Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to everyone. I prepared actually 2 short slides in English, but if you allow me, I will make my presentation in French.
So, I brought a brief testimony of the sea transport industry, transport of passengers and goods. This is 80% of world trade. Is taken along sea. Some 30 million passengers are carried a year on the cruises. I'm Hervé Gastinel. I'm one of the. I have one of the few French shipping flags left, and so it's a company which has 13 ships, small ships, 100 and 150 cabins. In fact, these ships are less than 10 years old. So we had a meeting of the coalition of maritime transport or sea transport in 2019 to work together at an international level to come up with a charter called SAILS, which you can see here on the screen, for sustainable actions for innovative and low-impact shipping. The idea is this charter is a charter of good practices signed by 14 shipping companies. It comes up with specific actions which are shared in order to reduce our impact on our ecosystems, which of course is intimately linked to us, particularly for those of us who sail goods or passengers, and of course also dealing with sea exploration. I don't have much time to go into many details, but let's have a look at a couple of the initiatives under this charter. Of course, at the very heart is the optimization of energy performance of the vessels. Even though most shipping of goods and passengers only account for 3% of CO2 emissions in the world, and that cruising only accounts of the 3% of that 3%, nonetheless, we want to reduce our CO2 emissions and to work on the energy efficiency of our vessels by using technology, but also new kinds of engines, as well as logistics and consumption, or even routes. The architecture, of course, we're also dealing in architecture. The second one is to reduce noise, underwater noise. Very important, of course, for the flora and fauna, marine fauna. We've worked too on reducing noise, the vibrations too coming out of vessels' engines. We are Category 1 vibrations by the Verita Bureau, Category 1 vibrations and noise. This is the bureau which deals with the design of our ships, of course, and they're very involved. Protection of cetaceans, whales, very important too. We are very vigilant about the training of our teams, and we are active about this. We have people up on the decks to see, to track and look at the routes of whales to avoid collisions, of course. We also share these data with particular sites, particularly happy sites. We share our information with them. We want to reduce speed, of course, of our vessels, also forms part of this aim. We also have the limitation of use of high sulfur fuels, reducing pollution. I talked about CO2, but it's not only that. We also have sulfur, nitrogen, and fine particles, which we want to reduce permanently. For example, we now, with diesel fuel oil, we're stopping to use which has we're content in sulfur of half that of what is expected by the world standard, which has been applied since 2001. We've reduced it by half. We have a new generation of vessels which are sometimes worked on liquefied natural gas, and we have a recent boat which runs only on this and which does not create any sulfur emissions or other kinds of emissions for that matter. We want to fight against invasive vessels nourished by technical water treatment, which are then rejected back into the sea. The water treatment uses specific chemical products, UV, to neutralize 99% of the organisms contained in the ballast waters, for example, which could have an impact or which could be a biological contamination. And we're working on this actively. Another element in this charter concerns the collaboration, scientific collaboration. Then we have a role about the naturalist, of the nature part. We also carry on board scientists and other. By way of conclusion, we have a couple of slides to show what the current vessels look like. You can realize that we have all the components, all the elements, what elements in a vessel can contribute to improving biodiversity, propulsion, sewage treatment, waste recycling, navigation routes too, as well as raising awareness amongst passengers. We have a role to play here too, of course, and then another scientific role which we need to play. Over the last boat vessel, we have the Commandant de Chartres, the only French vessel, be it public or private, which can go to the North Geographic Pole. It's a vessel on which we have given place to science. We have made major investment, more than 2 million euros, for laboratories, both dry and wet, which are permanently on board and used by scientists and are an open platform. I'd like to appeal to all scientists who want to use these laboratories on board this vessel to collaborate with us in the protection of our environment. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much. So in the interest of time, since I'm being told that we are running a little behind, I do want to thank each one of the three panelists and do a quick recap. I think we heard very loud and clear that businesses today are ready to come and be part of the solution. They recognize that biodiversity risk is critical to their businesses, and they want to be able to move to the equation where nature and biodiversity is part of the solution. We have heard from one of the biggest sectors, which is today responsible for nature loss, but can actually be the biggest contributor to being nature positive, which is agriculture. We have heard from the biggest enabler, which is financing, because how we choose and where we choose to put money can really shift the economy that we all inhabit. And then we've really heard a practical example of how building a business in such a way that it lives in harmony with nature comes to life. But the world doesn't end here, the challenge doesn't end here. What businesses need from governments and multilateral organizations are clear metrics. So to make sure that the post-2020 global biodiversity framework is ambitious and sets the ground for TNFD, sets the ground for science-based targets for nature, as well as provides a level playing field for businesses who are doing right by nature, but are also able to then provide livelihoods to their employees and society as a whole. Thank you so much for listening to us. And with that, I close this panel and hand it over to the next moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. This is session number 3 on innovating to finance conservation and ecosystems. I'm your moderator, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez. I'm the chairperson, CEO of the Global Environmental Facility. I'm really delighted to have this great group of panelists, and I just want to dive directly into the innovative finance, conservation, and ecosystem restoration. The Global Environment Facility has been supporting financial support to developing countries to implement their environmental commitments, directly responding to the conventions. And we've been doing a great job. The GEF has been the strongest supporter of biodiversity finance. We mobilize around $400 million every year. You may think that's a lot of money, but it isn't. Today, we mobilize around $120 billion for nature conservation on an annual basis. 80% of that is public expenditures. This is what Costa Rica, my country, invests in Costa Rica. This is what Germany invests in Germany. What every single country invests in their own country through public expenditures. 20%, the other 20% is a mix. It's a mix of ODA and private sector, bilateral and multilateral. So you may think $400 million, what GEF is allocating on an annual base is just 5%, 0.5% of what is actually invested on an annual base. This is what we are investing right now. If we go and see what we need to be investing to financially support the actions on the next generation of biodiversity-related targets, we got a big challenge. We should be mobilizing around $500 billion by 2030 so we can narrow down the global financial gap. And of course, there is a limited fiscal space for countries to mobilize better, and there's a high potential to be innovative. This is the topic that we want to develop today. So with this, I would go directly to our very dear friend, Yannick Lemarak, Executive Director of the Green Climate Fund, with his appreciation on how do we mobilize resources from all sources in a way that can help us narrow that global financial gap. How do we address this in the next incoming process? And why don't you tell us a little bit about that, the ecosystem approach that the Green Climate Fund is developing, because this is a very innovative work that you've been leading directly, Mr. Yannick.
Many thanks, Carlos Manuel. The mandate of the Green Climate Fund is to accelerate climate innovation and investment. And in order to implement these mandates, we have a fairly large and quite unusual toolbox. For example, we are capital agnostic. While most agencies can only provide one type of finance, grant or sovereign loans or guarantees or equity, in our case, we are capitalized in grant, and we can convert this grant finance into any kind of grant and non-grant instrument. We are also partner agnostic. Once again, why a lot of multilateral organizations tend to work with a subset of agencies, as we can work with almost every institution that can make a difference when it comes to climate change. Right now, we have 113 accredited entities, and means basically institutions that can directly submit a project proposal to us. And it's ranged from some of the largest commercial banks in the world, in France, for example, BNP Paribas and Crédit Agricole, to multilateral and national development banks, such as, for example, the Agence Française de Développement in France, to UN organizations, to civil society organizations that are at the forefront of the fight against climate change. And we are also willing to take risk if the return in terms of climate impact is commensurate. So what have we tried to do of this unusual toolbox in order to address the issue of increasing financial flows to ecosystems conservation? And I would like to give an example of one project that we have recently financed in November 2020. And it's a $750 million project for private equity at the subnational level for climate adaptation and climate mitigation. And the $750 million of private equity should mobilize normally up to $3 billion. This project is very significant because it's difficult to mobilize private equity at the subnational level. Also, they account for 70% of the climate solution. It's very difficult to mobilize private equity for climate change. And here we ended up mobilizing private equity for climate change at the subnational level, and 50% of the 42 countries that participate in this program are LDCs and SEEDs, countries that are normally bypassed by private finance. And to reassure our board, and what we did to make this possible is that we basically acted as an anchor investor and first loss investor. Anchor investor, we put our money first. First loss investor, we are the first to lose money. And this provided enough reassurance to institutional investors to also invest in the fund. Now, to provide reassurance to our fund managers that we could do that, we have paid a lot of attention to our general managers and who will manage the fund. And we ended up with a totally unprecedented coalition with Pegasus, a private equity investor, but also R20, IUCN, Gold Standard, BNP Paribas. So institutions that, as far as I know, had never worked together. And if this project works, it will have global ramification because we will have established a track record that investing at the subnational level in climate adaptation and mitigation is good business. And investors will be able to calculate risk. And right now, we are also working on a similar private equity funds, for example, for coral reef management. And here again, if such a project were to work, the fact that private finance represents only 14% of conservation finance might be something from the past in 3, 4, 5 years.
Thank you so much, Yannick, for your interventions. And now let me go over with Ornella Kursi, which is the Deputy Minister of Tourism and Environment of Albania. It's a pleasure, Ornella, to have you over here. Albania is moving a lot of great ideas, particularly through you, with a focus not just to the Balkans nations, but also the Mediterranean. And you've been talking about this subnational climate finance initiative. How does these new innovative approaches can help mobilize more resources and more efficiently? Ornella.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel, and thank you, Yannick, for the presentation of the most important project that we have in Balkans now from GCF. So Carlos talked about money, and I was asking myself, what about the results? But we need money, but also we need results. And if we need results, we need the sustainability. And Yannick explained about how difficult it is to engage this project and to engage the equity fund. But I will tell how important it is for our countries, for my country, to have this project and to engage this equity fund. I am representing Albania, and I am representing at the GCF and in the GEF small countries with big problems and small budgets. So, and for the environment, they are smaller and smaller every year. For example, for my ministry, it is 0.8 for the annual budget of my government. And we have two very important issues in my ministry, the tourism sector and the environmental sector. But in the meantime, from the last IUCN research, we have seen that the Mediterranean is the most polluted sea from the marine litter. And the biggest polluters are we, the small countries. And because we have some big problems on the mismanagement of waste, except the knowledges and except the experience that we don't have. And the biggest problem that we have in this concern, it's the investments. The private sector is not working. and the engagement of the government with the private sector is not working. By the other hand, on climate change, we are in the most attacked country from the last global research from the World Bank in all Europe. But we are not impacting climate change. We are producing 100% renewable energy in my country, for example. So the biggest problem, the really biggest problem, it's that the environment is not a priority for our governments. And it's not a priority to help the business and the private sector to have the sustainability of their work for the environment and for the country. Because our biggest asset is the nature. We don't have other assets. We have only the nature resources. And why we are trying to have now another project for the Mediterranean, and why we are trying to work and we are working very hard with the Union of Mediterranean to have another project for the Mediterranean, to help the government to put the environment as their priority and to put the sustainability of these investments as their priority, firstly. Secondly, because environment has no borders and we have to work with each other. And the only way how to work the small Balkan countries with big nationalist problems with each other, it's only the environment and it's the private sector. Without the private sector, we can't find the way how to have these bridges together. We as governments, we are thinking only about politics and policies. But the policies, they are implemented by the private sector. And nobody is asking the private sector how they are implementing our policies and if they can implement our policies. And this private sector, for example, it's a key factor for the plastic pollution, for the transport, for the fisheries, and for everything. So this financement is an opportunity for my country and for our countries in Balkans and in Mediterranean, the small countries. The government of Albania is in a strong collaboration, as I said, with the Union of Mediterranean for having this new project, for having a clear, sustainable financement of the environment. We have almost now 20% of our territory as protected area, and from our overview as a government, as the agency of protected area management, we are seeing the private sector as our enemy. They are destroying our protected areas, we are saying. But how to develop a country that without the 20% of their territory? For example, and I will give another example. Yes, 2 sentences, sorry. Vjosa, for example, Vjosa River is the second most famous word for Albania. If you are Googling Albania, Vjosa is the second famous word. And even Leonardo DiCaprio is working about Vjosa, and I don't know if you know where Albania is, but and how to protect and how to conserve 300 square kilometers, 300 kilometers river, and the whole area near to the river, and to have in conservation all this area, and in the meantime, to develop our small, very small country. So for this, we, all the small countries with big problems and small budgets, need to find the perfect line between the private sector investment, the equity funds, the debts, and in the meantime, the protection of our big asset, the nature. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ornella. And don't feel bad by the fact that your budget is 0.8% of the national budget. On average, at the world level, Ministries of Environment, the budget of the Ministries of Environment is 0.2 of the national budget. Nevertheless, your efforts are very much welcome. So let me move over with Benigno Lopez Diaz from the Inter-American Development Bank to talk about the Natural Capital Lab and how this approach is helping this multilateral agency work on blended finance with the private sector. Over to you.
Thank you, Carlos, and good morning to everyone. As we said in our vision of the IDB, This is the time to achieve sustainable growth with investment in nature and climate. However, as you pointed out, all countries, all governments are with fiscal strains. Public funds alone won't do it, so we have to mobilize the private sector. It's crucial to mobilize all sectors and all stakeholders. In a way, we can work together to achieve a green economy. This is precisely the type of work that we do here in One Planet Summit supports. Countries now must take advantage of private investor growing interest, as we just hear today. For example, when we talk about Natural Capital Lab program, that works in issue across all our sectors. We are developing financial products such as special purpose bioeconomy vehicles, venture capital to invest in local projects in Latin America and the Caribbean, and debt for nature swaps. The Natural Capital Lab was created in 2018 by the Inter-American Development Bank with the help of France as its founding partner that came after One Planet Summit in that year. French support, the NCL fund, has already helped approve 2 projects, one a 3 million technical assistance fund to provide operational support to a 20 million loan program in Peru, with the goal to increase investment in bio-business in the Peruvian Amazons. The Amazonia General Accelerator and Investment Trust, a 4 million multi-country project, including 2 million investment grant from NCL also. This trust and accelerator program for Starbucks and SME located in different Amazonian countries will help them raise private funding with a view to scaling up their operations. There are other projects in the pipeline that we will be discussing later in the year. But NCL is not only about tropical forests. The dynamic created following his inception has encouraged other donors, such as Global Environment Facility and the government of UK, to contribute to it. At the same time, we are working to include nature in post-COVID recovery programs, such as Costa Rica Blue Economy Recovery Strategy. The IDB also supports the intrinsic value exchange, which is establishing nature as a new public asset class, where shares of natural asset companies can be shared and traded in a similar way to companies listed in the stock market. And at the strategic level, we are updating 15 country strategies with natural capital inputs to target an inclusive and sustainable recovery. Soon, we hope to approve an action plan for greater integration of biodiversity within the bank. The IDB is also working and approved in the last Barranquilla session an ambitious Amazon initiative to support the sustainable development of the Amazon in 7 Latin American countries. It will be based on 4 pillars: bioeconomic, land use, sustainable forestry and livestock, and human capital development and sustainable cities. That is what I can share with you at this moment.
Well, thank you so much, Benigno, for that. And here we got the pleasure of having 2 very strong leaders on the private sector, Philippe Saotti, CEO of Midova, and Christophe Kotchner, Executive Chairman of HSBC Pollination. Thanks for joining us. I want to hear from both of you on risk and benefits and how do we scale up financing. Philippe, please.
Okay. Merci. Je vais parler en français.
I'll speak French. Thank you. Now, to begin, perhaps coming back to the summit, the One Planet Summit, I would like to thank all those who have really developed this way in which we can discuss, and it's been going for 4 years now. Now, when we started investing in nature-based solutions came about because of we had the LDN, which started the first One Planet Summit. And then the investment was made the second one, but it is in 2018. And this year, in January, we went a bit further and we brought in biodiversity as well, and that was factored more into the program. And some of the funds and some of these technical assistance was dedicated to the Great Green Wall in Africa. So basically, these summits are important because they show that we are mobilizing all, and we can actually bring all these people together to consider the ecosystems. That being said, though, I'm very happy to see the LDN mentioned as an example, as a very important example of this development. But at the same time, I would say that it's a wee bit frustrating because it makes me a wee bit sad because LDN, the fund, you would need 10, and you've done this, and we see that we're pretty much on our own in this area 4 years on. I mean, we're very happy to see other actors, but therefore, what's important here is that going beyond any pledges that we might make with such funds, it means that we can really look at how we can use investment. 4 years ago, the pipeline was empty. Now, 5 years on, we have really got a number of projects that are underway, and we can support them. And they're at different levels of development. And we've got technical assessment, and then incubation, and then you actually get investment. So, and I think this means that you can really get down to work, as Harrison Ford said. But we shouldn't underestimate the difficulties in all of this, though, and there are quite a few of them. At first, those watch about the mixed finance. Now, this is essential, but it's not always easy to get. It takes a lot of time to get that finance together. Well, I think people on this table, I'm very happy that the SNCF is now a part of it, and I've been working with Christophe Natal, and I've been following this project for a number of years now, and I think it went through a number of difficulties, and I think that we see that it's something that's difficult to do, but we do have to speed this up, though. We do have to bring in these finance programs, these mixed finance programs, quickly. Now, another point is this: the link, but possible conflict between climate and biodiversity. You might see some differences of opinion there, of reforestation, plantation, and monoculture and agriculture. And also, you've got with biodiversity that we don't know price. There is a price for carbon, and there are certain labels. And here we don't makes it more difficult for us to broaden investment. So I think then we need to innovate today. We need to really get out of our comfort areas, and I think we have to talk to stakeholders much more and involve them, so that as part of this, we've on this nature-based solutions, we can make this a real asset, really. And I think that this is something that has led us to work with HSBC and Lombardia. We have got this natural capital investment alliance, so that we can actually decide exactly what it means, what is natural capital. And of course, I'll leave my friend from HTC to say something about this and to describe exactly what that alliance is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Christophe.
Merci, Philippe. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having us here. What I'm trying to do in the next 4 minutes is to bridge cognitive dissonance, i.e., make investors and investment opportunities understand each other. As we have heard before, there's a huge need to invest into nature, into natural capital. There's also plenty of capital around, and we shouldn't underestimate the willingness of insurance companies and of pension funds to invest into nature. These organizations have very long liabilities, and they're very concerned about climate change, and they are very interested in their self-interest that nature is preserved and invested into. But people speak different languages. I'll give you a few examples. These investors think about buckets. When they hear about natural capital, it's a new asset class. They don't understand. They ask us, is this infrastructure? Is this property? Is this private equity? Is this impact? What is it? Which bucket should we use to invest into? So we need to be clearer in our communication what natural capital really is. What are the characteristics? What are the correlations? What are the characteristics of investments? Second is, it's a very long-term investment. Real assets are long-term investments, and institutional investors look for counterparts which are around in 15 years. So we need to have the credibility to do that properly. Third is people. To invest into natural capital, you need to bring people together from very different trades, and you know that from your organization. You need people who have NGO experience, you need investment bankers, you need asset managers, you need risk managers, you need lawyers with a very special know-how. You need to bring these teams together. Also, institutional investors are used to see to think in return, in risks. They accept to think also in impact. They also want to understand what is the risk of impact. Can you really achieve your impact? And they need scale. And scale is the last keyword I'm going to elaborate on. These investors want to put significant money to play, and so they need counterparts and opportunities to invest into. They need to have creative value creation. They need to understand the trade-offs between impact and return, if they occur at all. So when this is properly defined, when we as asset managers follow our fiduciary duty and implement those principles which are already best practice in ordinary asset management to natural capital, I think we can bridge the gap between investors and opportunities.
Thank you, Christopher. Thanks, and thanks to our panelists. With this, we come to an end of our panel. Please join me in expressing our gratitude to them. And allow me now to introduce the Secretary of State for Biodiversity of France, Ms. Abba. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, ministers, leaders of international organizations, business people, finances, NGOs. The pace of our event was really sustained. I'd like to thank all these. You've contributed to exchanges. You've also seen that the One Planet Summit has created a platform to accelerate action. Many initiatives we have seen have already yielded concrete results on the ground, including the most recent launched in January 2021. All these coalitions of actors contribute to consolidating the level of ambition of the international community on nature conservation in connection with the other global challenges of climate change, global health, or inequalities. As you will no doubt have seen at the opening of the Congress on Friday, the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, defends multilateral action by evidence and action rather than by words. It is by showing concretely through pilot experiences that transforming our societies and our economies is possible that we will convince the most reluctant actors in public opinion. The One Planet Summit has accelerated since 2017 the mobilization of all energies to initiate movement towards action. Our debates today have shown this, as has the diversity of the project's present. So you can feel proud of the results we've obtained. But we also know that we must go further and faster to win the race against time which is engaged, so that changes in climate and biodiversity are not irreversible. We must consolidate these results while remaining vigilant that our commitments are transformed into concrete actions and projects. We will have other meeting points, as like today, to assess these actions and ensure the necessary accountability, which is essential. For example, we'll come back to the exemplary Mediterranean Action Plan at the next summit of the two shores. We'll also come back to revisit the Great Green Wall Accelerator, the next Africa-France summit in Montpellier. We'll also revisit the One Planet's climate commitments at COP26 in Glasgow and those on biodiversity at COP15 in Kunming next year. The next important step will be the One Ocean Summit that the President of France announced on Friday. We must bring all the stakeholders around the table to launch concrete initiatives for the fight against marine pollution, the development of marine protected areas, and the reconciliation of maritime activities with the imperative of preserving the planet. The objective of this summit will also be to lay the foundations for a political agenda to make the oceans, especially beyond national jurisdictions, a common good of humankind. I know that the various partners present today will also be with us to work on this new stage in the fight which we will all lead for future generations. And I'd like to thank you very much for being with us today and helping us in this effort. Thank you very much indeed. So now this session has now come to an end. Thank you very much indeed.